Welcome to the Driven Moms Answering Adversity interview series, stories of success through setbacks from Mom Elevated. Together, we can shine a light on how normal challenges and struggles are, along with how we can overcome and rise above them. And today we have Breann with us, right? Breann?
Yeah, you got it. You did.
To
Yes,
share
good for
her
you.
story with us. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to dive into this. So if you wouldn't mind, Breann, would you want to share a little bit about your story to get us started?
Of course. Yes. So I'll try to keep it brief because I mean, who loves to talk about themselves, right? But um I grew up in Arizona and had what most would consider like a normal childhood. I was academically successful. I was a soccer player. I ended up playing Division 1 soccer, and then a couple years semi-professionally after that. So like everything was good, right? Like life is great. I'm on cloud nine. I'm a new college grad and playing semi-professionally, like something I'm loving. I'm at the height of my career, and then life just didn't go the same way. So I ended up having a career-ending injury, and then while I was recovering from surgery, the first surgery of that, I was drugged and raped, and so it really changed the game for me. It changed like the whole trajectory of my life. It like lost my identity. Who am I without soccer, without my sport, right? Because that's my community, that's the language I speak, it's what I've known since I was 4. It's like who I am at some level, right? And also I was a new grad. I hadn't really started in my career, knew I wanted to go to grad school, but what do I actually want to do? I knew it would be in like medicine and helping people, but I wasn't 100% certain. So it's kind of in this gap, right? And then this happens, and it was just like any confidence I had, any idea of who I thought I was just like taken from me in that night. And so it really was this idea of, now looking back, right? I can speak on it, and that journey, it's been almost a 25-year journey. So it's been this idea of healing myself and figuring out what the next step is, sometimes alone, sometimes with help. Um, and so all of that to say, it then took me down this road of really the mind body connection. So I ended up going back to grad school, got my doctorate in physical therapy. And then shortly after graduating, well, cut back, during the final year of PT school, we had a guest lecture come in, and it was all about pelvic health, pregnancy, pelvic floor. And I was like, what? I had no idea this was a thing, right? But I had problems because of the rape. And so I had a lot of pain with intercourse, I had a lot of bleeding and just different issues in that region, not having any clue that there was literally help for that. So of course I was immediately drawn in and like, wait, what? I need more, like, give me more, I need to digest this. And so I went up to the professor afterwards and basically was like, tell me more. And that's really what started the journey for me. So during my 3rd year of clinical rotations, I started doing all of the coursework to become a pelvic health therapist, in addition to like the other physical therapy, if you will. So orthopedics is kind of my jam, just based on being an athlete, I think. So then right after graduating, that's what I got into. I was doing orthopedics and doing pelvic health. But what I quickly realized was that a lot of the patients with pelvic health dysfunction or sexual dysfunction that weren't getting better, or they just weren't getting in that last like 20-30% to their goals, or they'd have a regression, that there was almost always this kind of trauma history or adverse childhood experiences. Maybe there was abuse, things like that. And it was
Yeah.
like this moment of realization of like, that's interesting.
Maybe.
Plus, I obviously have my own story, right? So that, I mean, that just really is what like completely changed the trajectory of who I am
Yeah.
and how I can show up as a mom, as a practitioner for myself, for my husband, all the friends and people and all the things. But also, really the journey I went down as far as my education. And so I started taking all advanced coursework in all the systems of the body. So visceral, which is the organs, vascular and neural. So not just the musculoskeletal system, but really diving into the whole being.
Yeah.
And then also bringing in those factors that affect us. So like what's happening in the world around us and how that affects us, but also our own experiences and how our body keeps the score, so to speak, or I say the tissues hold the truth. And so, it's been such a beautiful blessing to have to work through my own healing journey, but then to be able to serve with compassion and empathy because I've been through stuff. And and because of what we go through and how that imprints, it ultimately dictates how we see the world, how we live in the world, how we perceive ourselves in the world. And so we may recreate an environment or a scenario or a pattern, so to speak, based on how we imprinted from that one thing. And that could be years and years later, but we see that there's kind of this recurring pattern that happens. And so it's such a blessing to be able to get in and help people to unpack that, unravel that, not only in the mind, but also in the body, and really allow for that transformation to happen. So yeah,
That's
so that's me.
that's amazing. I think that's
Yeah.
well, not only I also feel like a lot of what they end up needing help with, they probably don't even realize it's there anymore. Like because it becomes something that you've just probably buried for so long and you've just lived
Yeah.
with it. It's just
Um,
there. That
that's so true.
yeah.
um, so I don't know if you can still hear me, but yeah, that's so true. So that happens a fair amount is don't realize it's there. They've forgotten about it. And that they have this kind of foggy, like, oh, maybe I don't really remember. Maybe, yeah, that seems about that time, right? So that's a very common thing to see. And it's because our body is so brilliant at, hey, I got to get up the next day and be a mom. I got to get up the next day and go to work. I got to get up the next day and study. I got to live life, right? I got to
Yeah.
function. And so we're going to take and shove that down naturally. I always say it's kind of like, so the analogy that really comes up that people tend to go, huh, that's fascinating. I get that. It's always say it's like you have the day you're born, you're given a drawer for like a dresser, right?
Yep.
And over the years, so I'm almost 45. So from birth until now, so for the last 45 years, every year I get new socks and I
Oh,
put the socks in the drawer, but I never remove any socks. I just like the socks from when I was 7 are in the drawer, the socks from when I was 21 are in the drawer. Well, I can pretty much guarantee you if I went back and grabbed a pair like from the back, they're gonna have holes, they're not gonna the elasticity is gonna be gone, they're not gonna fit, like whatever it is, right? They don't serve me now. And
right.
maybe they did then, but they don't now. And we can pretty much guarantee that. So if I can go in and kind of clean out that drawer, not only does it open space, right, and allow my body to be in this calmer, parasympathetic, settled space. But now I can go to the store and buy these cute pair of socks that are totally amazing that I want to wear now, right? And I can add those to the drawer. So it really is a matter of saying, like, I don't remember those socks that I wore when I was 3, but they're literally at the very back of the drawer and I don't need them anymore. Let's get rid of them.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I love that. I think
Yeah, it
that's
just works. People get it, right?
yeah, yeah, it makes so much sense. I think that's fantastic. Well, and I think it's really important. I had a really wild elementary
Mm.
experience like that whole time. And so when people ask me when something happened, I'm like, I really don't know. Like I associate everything that happened when I was about 10 years old. That's literally
Mhm.
how I associate it. When I was about 10 years old, all of
Yeah,
this happened. If I really go back and pick through it, I could probably tell you exactly when, but like
yeah,
just how that's how my brain has associated all of that with like that timeline. And so it is kind of like that. I just finally was just like, you know what? But it doesn't really matter. It happened about then. I don't need to go pick
right,
through it anymore.
right.
I don't need to go figure out exactly what timeline that was. It's just it was
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
and now it's okay. Like I'm good. I'm in a
Right.
better.
How do we just honor it, give it space, accept it? So I just published a book, and it is a very vulnerable book, I'll say. And it's a lot of my traumas throughout my life, and then like the healing process and trying to educate people on the different modalities that are out there available to them. And so they know they're not alone. And what I'm noticing is that I had bronchitis and a sinus infection, and every time I'm going to like produce something that's vulnerable or that there may be criticism on, or I'm using my voice, it's like I always now I'm realizing. So
Yeah.
this like neural linking of like, oh, interesting. This is my realization and I do this for a living, but this is just my realization in the last couple of weeks. Is like, oh, that 6-year-old version of me who had pneumonia, who also had X, Y, and Z happen. Wow, those lungs are really impressioned by that like desire to step in and use my voice and speak. And it's like, but does my voice matter? She's feeling vulnerable. She's feeling like she's not heard. And so how do we go there? And I don't know if it was like right at 6, if I was 6 years and 2 months old, right? But like, again,
Right.
you kind of have this idea. And then how can we sit with her and just be like, girl, I see you. And because of you and because of your strength, we're actually here today. And we get to serve
Yes.
and we get to do all these really cool things because you survived and you used those protection mechanisms. You use those various things that maybe don't serve you anymore today. They might, but they might not. But you use those and you survive through it. And look where we are. And like, thank you for that. Right.
Oh, yes. I think that's an
So
one, and that's what it is really, is sometimes you're there, you just have to survive through it, you get through it, and then
totally.
you can use those tools, or you can dive in deeper to maybe what you didn't realize
Mm,
might have been more helpful at the time, or like it
right.
serves such a great purpose later on when you can get through
Mm-hmm.
it and when you can get beyond it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like using that pain for purpose and power, right? It's like taking that experience and almost like rewire, and then like, okay, well, how can I serve now using this wisdom,
yes. Oh,
right? The other thing that came to me when you were talking just now is the other thing that I see commonly is a parent when their child hits the age of which the parent was experienced. So like, let's use 6. So at 6, I had an experience. My body holds on to that. When my child is about that same age, there's like a triggering that happens. Um, and I see it manifest in so many different ways, but there is this linking of like, oh, I'm now seeing it from a different angle, but that age really is that kind of trigger for that almost rewounding or surfacing that. And then we're like, what? It wasn't bothering me for the last 6 years, right? But now that my kid is 6, oh, hey, I have this, I need to work through this now, right? So
oh,
this
that's so
awareness.
interesting. I've
Mm-hmm.
never even really thought about it. Now I'm thinking back to when my son was 10 and I was like, did I have anything happen that year?
Yeah.
I was like, that's so fascinating. I'm going to be
Yeah.
thinking
It's
about
very
that all
interesting.
day now. Thank you. No,
So you're very welcome.
yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate
so just, where every person is different, every journey is different. No two people are the same. And you and I could be walking down the street and, it's a dark street and there's no one around. All of a sudden somebody jumps out and they're holding a pencil. And I think they're holding a knife based on my own history and my own story and my own realization. And I'm the closer one to the person and I freak out, right? And you're standing next to me and you realize it's a pencil. So your response is completely different. Maybe you're taller than me, and so you don't feel like there's a disparity of height or force, or you're farther, so I'm in front, right? Like there's all of these things. We
Yeah,
could have the same experience, but really take it in so different from one another. And then how does that play out? Right. I mean, you think of like twins that are raised in a family that's abusive and one goes off and becomes a CEO of a company and the other one becomes an alcoholic. And so, yeah, it's just really looking at everybody is different and how we hold those experiences are different.
that's so fascinating to me. That's incredible, but it's so true. So
Mm-hmm.
on that kind of note,
Yeah,
what on that entire journey, what do you think is the biggest adversity that you answered, and how did you answer it? Because obviously there were, like, as we spoke yesterday, I had an interview yesterday, and they said it's like layers of adversity. It doesn't go away.
absolutely.
But what would you say is like the biggest, the most pivotal, the one that really was like, this is this is what I need to get through to get to where I want to be?
I don't know. I don't know that I could say it was one specific adversity because I do think they layer. I know they layer. And they spider, I always say it's like a spider web in your system. So, the
Mhm.
experience of one thing can have these like legs or these webbing, and then something else happens and it can link into the web and then all the things. What I would say is, if I'm really sitting with this, bringing me back to, so the rape, so I was drugged and then raped by three people. And because of the drugs, I was not, I mean, I was trauma brain anyway, but I was definitely not in my right mind, probably for days, literally, if we think about, just the metabolizing of the drugs, so to speak. And so I didn't do the right thing. And I say that in quotes. If you're not actually watching this, I'm doing air quotes, because, you're taught like, oh, when the building is burning, you run out, grab the animal closest to you or whatever, and you run out and you call 911. Well, that's
Yeah.
not what I did. Right. I literally like got to my car and drove home and showered. And so when you logically, you're like, oh, that, like, oh, bummer. Right. You
Yeah.
should have gone to the hospital. You should have had a kit done, like all the things. Right. And so kind of replaying that, like, I didn't make the right decisions, quote unquote, afterwards based on X, Y, and Z. And so therefore I'm a failure there. And that was the big one for me. Therefore, they are out possibly doing this to other humans.
Mm.
And that was really tough for me. But the failure piece, like, I'm a failure, I didn't do the right thing, that was really
Yeah.
the thing that, if I could say, like, overcoming that belief was probably the toughest, and
Yeah.
replayed in so many. It was like, if just the smallest thing happened. Like, I went to the grocery store and I was supposed to get a head of lettuce and I bought cabbage instead because I didn't realize I didn't read the sign, and my husband's like, I needed lettuce, not cabbage. And then immediately is like, well, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. Right. So it was like, it would play out, and even like the simplest daily tasks, when I wasn't doing perfect or doing the right thing. And so I would say that was probably, if I really kind of spin it, the thing that was really took the longest and
Yeah.
really played out in so many different ways. Yeah.
What kind of methods helped you to begin to overcome that? And because I'm sure it still probably still surfaces every now and
Oh,
then
totally.
because it's
100%.
so ingrained. But what
Totally.
what kind of methods help you to combat that and to overcome it?
Yeah. So, great question, because there's so many. And that's
Yeah.
really why I wrote the book too. And, you know, um, and there's no right steps for any, because everybody's different. And
Yeah.
so your journey and my journey, you may try, let's say, the work that I do, or you may try EMDR and you're like, yeah, it didn't really help that much. I don't feel like I got much out of it. And then you do some other things, and 2 years later, you come back to, let's say, EMDR, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is what I've needed. Yeah, well, it's in your right timing, right? So 2 years ago, your system wasn't quite ready, or that wasn't the tool that was really going to take you to the next step. You had to go through blank, blank, and blank, and then that's where it
Yeah.
kicked in, right? But to answer your question, for me, I've done so many, but EMDR was, and that's why I bring it up, so that if people don't know what that is, so licensed counselors can be trained in EMDR, and it's where they use rapid eye movement to help dip into the deeper part of the suppressed brain, basically, if you will, and bring forward anything that's those socks at the back of the drawer, if you will,
Yeah.
bring them forward and then help you disperse them and clear them out from the brain. Where I come in then is also in the body tissue. So it's kind of similar but different, but really working through the muscles and the joints and the organs and the vascular system and wherever it might be stored. So
Yeah.
it really, but EMDR was really, if I can say, kind of a lifesaver initially, because that's what I knew. I knew counseling, right? So it was like a matter of, I didn't go right away. And I don't know the statistics today, but it is pretty high that only like 20% of people have been through something like that actually go and get help.
Yeah.
And of that 20%, only 80%. I mean, it's like, I forget the numbers, but it is not a lot of people, right? There's a lot of shame that goes into that. There's a lot of
Right.
doubt, guilt, that kind of stuff, right? And so for me, it was probably about 18 to 24 months after the experience where I finally was like, I cannot live. I was making poor choices, so to speak, one trauma brain. I was doing all
Yeah.
of these things that weren't aligned with me. Let's put it that way. And so for me, EMDR was that first step. And then, like I said earlier, I didn't realize the capacity at which the body holds onto that until I was in grad school and then started going down that avenue. And then that was really this kicker to be like, oh, now you've really shifted over and there's function and there's flow when you're really moving. I'd done the brain work, but now I needed the brain and the body work, which is what I do clinically. So but I am a big advocate of EMDR for sure. Counseling, of course, and they have so many tools, but EMDR specifically when it's right for you and that your counselor would know when that's the case. Yeah.
I think that's amazing. And I love that you brought that up. I have a friend who does EMDR and
Oh,
she's
yeah.
by it, and yeah, I think it's incredible. And like you said, I associate it to like when I make my kids try things. You try it twice. You
Mm-hmm.
try it twice because the first
Mm-hmm.
time it's new, it's different. You're already like
Yeah.
thinking, I don't know about this. And so the second time around, you're more like, okay, I know what to expect. So now you're, tasting it or experiencing it from a
Right.
place where you're ready, you're more receptive, and
Mm.
now you can decide whether or not you like it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. But that's immediately what I thought of when you said, you might not be ready for it just yet. I'm like, yeah, and every time we try it, you got to try it twice. So
Right.
I
Well,
think
and if we talk
great.
layers, right? If there's a layer in the way, so to speak,
Yeah.
and let's say you attempted it, it wasn't really your thing, so you went and did something else and that was able to pull that layer out. Now when you go back, you're a totally different person,
Yeah.
right? So not only are you in a different mind space because it's a little more familiar and stuff, but now you're in this place where that layer has been removed, let's say, and now this next layer is ready to be dispersed or
I,
addressed. Yeah,
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's great.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. Well, then what do you think it is specifically for entrepreneurs that makes us continue on when things get tough, when you are unpacking those layers and going through and addressing them? What do you think it is about entrepreneurs that makes us keep going when it gets tough and we're not just gonna be like, I'm just gonna go get a job. It's gonna be fine.
Oh, isn't that so true, right? Have you, I'm sure you've had that conversation many, many times. Yeah.
Oh,
Um, at the end of the day, I think the two things. I think the why is greater. Um, they know their why, let's say that. They know their why and their why is greater than any excuse or any setback, right? I think the other thing too is they know like deep in their bones, even if there is adversity, they know it's like a calling. It's like this, like, I can't turn back from this. It's this awareness that deep down inside, I'm meant for more, or I'm meant for this thing. This is my purpose. And like, this might be really hard, but I can't, like, I would be like miserable and the grumpiest person if I went back to, let's say, 8 to 5 job or that kind of thing, right?
yeah.
So I really think it's that internal just calling, that knowing, that purpose, that why that really drives us to fumble and fail and go through the ebbs and flows because that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think if I can say it's, I'll use the word easier, although I'm not sure that's the right word, but it's a little more doable with the less socks in the drawer,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I love that.
because we're freer. We're
Yes.
freer to make decisions. We're making decisions that are, as an entrepreneur, that are aligned with us and our business today versus having those old belief patterns that may be sabotaging us or creating some limitations in how we move forward, or at the ease of which we move forward. So I think that's where, especially for high performers, clearing out the socks in the drawer is really important.
Yeah. Well,
Important for everybody, but yeah,
yeah, right, absolutely. But I feel
yeah.
like, yeah, as entrepreneurs, I think you also have the ability to pick and choose the socks a little bit
Mm-hmm.
better in some
Yeah,
ways.
there's some freedom there, right? There's some free. It can be scary, as we know. It can be scary, but there's also a lot of freedom in it. And again, I think that's too where when your drawer isn't too heavy and it feels good and there's flow and you know what's in there, then you can stand in that truth a little bit stronger,
Yeah.
and a little bit more confidently versus like maybe questioning yourself or doubting or second guess. You're just like, no, this is literally how it is. And this is how we're moving forward, right? We'll get there. We'll get there.
I love that. I think that's great. On the same note, then, what
Yep.
overall takeaway or lesson do you think other mompreneurs would be able to use specifically from your experience and what you've been speaking about?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. What overall takeaway or lesson do you think that other mompreneurs would be able to use specifically from your experience?
I like that question a lot. Let me see if I can condense it in my brain so I don't talk forever. The biggest takeaway, the biggest lesson is to breathe.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I say that because when we can learn to pause and take that breath, and that's our first line of defense, it's our first reaction, so to speak, but it's intentional because we've trained ourselves to do that, that we can really control. We can't control certain things outside of us, we just simply can't, but we can control ourselves in those things. We can
Yeah.
control how we show up, we can control how we react. And that's right, like that's work, but that's also as a mom.
Yeah.
So if I have a child who's freaking out and I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm like at my wits' end, my sympathetic nervous system is like on absolute, and I'm boiling, right? Like thing, I'm going to respond differently to my child or the situation than I would if I'm in this place of centered, calm, grounded. And you can achieve that truly and simply. It sounds so crazy, but just through a breath.
Yeah.
So
It is.
that to me is the big, and just and breathe in transitions. That would be kind of the extension off of that. So like I do a little three brain tapping thing too, but the breath is what I'm going to leave your people with, is this idea of when I leave the clinic and I'm going to pick up my son from school, I'm not rushing, I'm not like worry, I'm not forward thinking about what the next thing is. It's like, I'm present in the moment of there's a transition happening where I am leaving one role, so to speak, and I'm entering another role. And I want to enter that role as fresh and authentic as I can be and
Yeah.
not carry anything from one to the next. It'd be the same. My husband and I have 3 date nights a week where we date in and it's just intentional time. And it really is that shift from like motherhood into ushood.
Yeah.
And so that transition, how do I show up in that transition to ensure that when I walk into that new thing, I'm showing up as true and authentic and as present as I can be?
I think that's amazing. I often read and watch things that talk about like self-regulation and stuff like that, but I
Mm,
feel like sometimes just that language isn't always understood. Like it's really
mm,
hard. Then I have to go think about, okay, what does regulating mean? I feel like saying just breathe, like that's understood. You're gonna know what that means. It's gonna help you regulate anyway.
yeah.
But it's an easy, simple thing to think about when you're in the midst of chaos, even. So you're
Mhm.
like, oh, just breathe. Don't think about regulating myself. Just breathe for a
Right,
second.
right. Just take that, just tune in, take that breath. And you could think about it. So, like, as a mom, too, one of the things for me is like, well, and as a entrepreneur, is I want to serve. I want to serve. I want to do for others, right? Like, I
Yeah.
love that. I find so much joy in that, but I cannot do that from an empty cup.
Yep.
So, if I'm not taking that breath or I'm not taking that time to fill my cup, I can't, I can only serve at the capacity of which I'm filled, right? So, even if we take that idea and bring it into the breath, it's like, let me take a breath and fill myself up here, ground myself, and then I can be present in whatever needs to happen in this moment, right?
I love
So
that.
yeah, so I love what you're saying, because it's so true, and it really is that simple. You just have to remember to do it, and that's where
Yeah.
you have to train yourself. It has to become habit because you've put that intentional practice into play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, I love that takeaway. I'm gonna write that
Yeah.
down on a sticky note for today. Breathe.
Breathe.
Great.
Yes. Just breathe. Just
I love it.
you could set your alarm on your phone for every hour, right? Just like a little ding. And then you're
Oh,
like, oh, let me take a breath.
you know what?
But
I
I would
think
I would
I love
highly
it.
recommend it in transitions. The other
Yeah.
thing I'll tell my patients too is sometimes that's hard to remember at the beginning. And so I'll say, you know what, just take one or two breaths every time you go in to go to the bathroom. I mean,
Oh,
what else do you do on the toilet?
yeah.
Like your body knows what to do to eliminate. So just while you're there, don't take your phone in and just take a breath, right? Just
I think that's great. I've also now, my youngest, I started a meditation course in January, which it's very hard to be still when you are driven, ambitious, busy, like used to being busy. So I've been intentionally, with the
mhm.
intentionality, intentionally making sure that I'm making space for that. And so my youngest, it's been like a crazy couple of weeks. We had this conversation, and my youngest came up to me and said, "Mom, I know that you love it when you get your hair brushed. How about if I brush your hair and you do one of
Oh,
those one things that calms you down, you know, those one things?" I was like, "Yeah, the meditation." She's like, "Yeah, you do that, I'll brush your hair." I was like,
I love it.
"Okay." So,
That's like a mom win for sure.
right? So letting them know what's happening and be part of it, I think they notice more than we even give them credit for. So
100%.
I think it's great because what is it teaching her to do the same thing? So
To take care of herself and and she's recognizing for you. The next step is she's recognizing for herself, like, whoa, I'm overwhelmed. Hold on.
yeah,
Let me brush my own hair or whatever it is for her, right?
yeah.
That's really awesome. That's
I think
really
it's
awesome.
fantastic. So where's the best way for others to find you if they would like to learn more about you, soak up
Yeah,
all of your knowledge, be in your space, and find your book?
totally. Yeah. So everything is on my website. So Dr. B Fox and then CO. So drbfoxco.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And then the book it links through the website as well. It's sold on Amazon right now. So yeah, they can basically find anything they want through the website and contact me that way or just stalk me in whatever way feels good for them.
I love that. I will obviously have
Yeah.
the links in the description as well, but just in case they're listening, they can
Sure.
still
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been, like I said, I could talk to you all day long. I think it's so fascinating, all of these subjects, what you guys bring to the table, what you've been through. I think it's fascinating, and I so much appreciate you being here and sharing that story with us.
Of
So
course.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, everybody. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And like I always say, your story is inspirational. Your willingness to be open about it is much appreciated and needed in this space. I think it really just opens up conversations, really, if nothing else. But
Yeah.
for those of you out there who are facing your own adversity, know that you're not alone. That's the whole point of what we are doing. When you need an extra hand or mind for brainstorming during your mompreneur journey, we would also love to work with you through the Mama Elevated Society. We also know how Gift Yourself Grace as part of the society, which is just a quarterly review. I'm excited to finally include it. You'll find monthly check-ins for goal setting and assessing, and so much more for both your business and your mom life. And until next time, keep shooting for the stars.